The concept of witchcraft has through history inspired fear, superstition, and paranoia, which plunged mankind into tragedies commonly known as witch trials. Though the trials today are by most standards regarded as creations of ignorance and hysteria, they took on deadly seriousness, grounded in cultural, religious, and societal beliefs. Out of the numerous accusations of witchcraft, a few have risen to infamy due to either the strength of their trials, victims involved, or the persuasiveness of evidence brought forth. 5 such captivating and mysterious witch trials have been elaborated upon for the purpose of this discussion, in an attempt to trace the narratives behind them, the psychological dynamics involved, and how such a belief could take hold of the then populace regarding the convicted Salem Witch Trials. Indeed, no discussion of witch trials would ever be complete without the mention of the Salem Witch Trials, one of the darkest moments in colonial American history. These trials took place in Salem Village, Massachusetts, and resulted in the execution of 20 people, 14 women and 6 men, with many more imprisoned. The Salem Witch Trials commenced in 1692 with a group of girls at Salem Village acting strangely. They would fall into fits, convulse, and scream. The Puritan leaders of the village knew just what caused the symptoms: witchcraft. The girls accused several local women, among whom was Tituba, a slave of Caribbean origin, Sarah Good, and Sarah Osborne. Their accusations began to spread through the village like an epidemic of hysteria. The trials rapidly expanded, driven by personal vendettas, local feuds, and deep-seated religious conviction that the devil was at work in the world. Evidence used to prosecute the accused included spectral evidence, dreams of the accused appearing and tormenting others in spectral form, confessions coerced from the accused under torture, as well as testimonies from the afflicted girls themselves. The most fascinating thing regarding the Salem Witch Trials is the degree with which such ideas were taken to an extreme. There was general acceptance that evil, invisible forces were working in the community. During the trials, great names like that of Cotton Mather espoused the existence of such witches among them. Spectral evidence, which was later to be declared as untrustworthy, was regarded as proof, and an overt exhibition of agony by the witch-affected girls shrouded the accusations with an appearance of their legitimacy. In retrospect, the trials are considered one of the tragic instances of mass hysteria based on fear, superstition, and religious fanaticism. Still, at that period in history, the community had such a great fear for the devil's intervention that their convictions were found to be very reasonable. The Pendle Witch Trials. The Pendle Witch Trials are among the most infamous witch trials that took place in Britain, particularly in Lancashire, England. They claimed the lives of 10 people who were accused of witchcraft. These trials are unique because there is an extensive amount of documentation that has survived, which gives an account of the details of the proceedings. It narrates a story of how Alison Device, a young woman residing within the Pendle area, came across a peddler named John Law. According to them, she had cursed Law after some dispute. He afterwards fell sick. An incident that started with a chain of accusations and counter-accusations among local families and culminated in a major witch hunt. She and members of her family, along with members of the rival family known as the Chattox clan, were arrested, taken to trial, and charged with witchcraft. Evidence produced during the trial included confessions from torture, hearsay, like that from a young girl, Janet Device, against her mother and grandmother, both accused of witchcraft. The most chilling feature of this trial was the presence of Janet, only 9 years old, and her damning testimony. Part of the reason that the Pendle Witch Trials prove so compelling is due to the atmosphere of fear and suspicion surrounding the accused. The case of old Demdike, matriarch of one of the accused families, reputed to be a witch long before the trial, added to the veracity of the charges. Demdike was the most active witch, immersed in the darkest of practices, and to many, her admission to keeping a familiar spirit named Tib was enough to seal her case. There was an impression of a widespread conspiracy because a supposed coven of witches whose members implicated one another in their alleged crimes seemed to be right. Also, the testimony of Janet Device was given much significance because children seldom lied in the court. The more composed she was while narrating her family's supposed witchcraft, the more realistic these accusations sounded. The Würzburg and Bamberg Witch Trials. The witch trials of Würzburg and Bamberg counted among the most extensive and cruel in all of Europe. Within just 5 years, from 1626 to 1631, more than 900 people were executed for witchcraft in Bamberg, while the number of victims was similarly high in Würzburg. These trials took place amidst great social, political, and religious turmoil. The 30 Years' War had left a trail of devastation through the German states, bringing widespread famine, disease, and economic collapse in its wake. The witch hunts became a way to explain misfortune and find scapegoats in a desperate setting. Both in Würzburg and Bamberg, Catholic prince-bishops ordered trials with almost feverish zeal in a relentless drive to eradicate heresy and clean their territories of witches. The trials began by accusing lower-class people, but reached the nobility and even clergy, reflecting the level of hysteria that had engulfed these regions. One of the perfidiousnesses of these trials now proved to be the method of torture to force confessions, horrific tortures, like the strappado hoisting the victim up by his wrists and then dropping him suddenly, and the thumbscrew, which would crush the thumbs. These methods led to numerous false confessions, which in turn implicated others, fueling a cycle of accusations. The trials were also remarkable for the astounding sweep of individuals accused, from young children to respectable citizens. For example, among Würzburg's list of victims were priests and members of the nobility, even the prince-bishop's nephew. The depth of conviction across social classes lent an air of legitimacy to the trials, which the claims alone could hardly be dismissed as unadulterated hysteria. In retrospect, these trials represent one of the most horrible moments of the European witch craze, revealing how fear and superstition can culminate into mass violence. The Torsåker Witch Trials. The Torsåker Witch Trials in Sweden are among the deadliest events in Scandinavia, as 71 people were executed for witchcraft on the same day, 65 women and 6 men. This trial, therefore, because of its scale and rapidity, is one of the most striking examples of the witch hunts in Europe. The Torsåker trials coincided with a period in which Sweden was racked by religious panic and superstition. Local Lutheran pastor Laurentius Christophori Horneus was to become a leading player in the witch hunt. His sermons frequently dwelled on the dangers of witchcraft, and this, together with testimony from children to the effect that they had been kidnapped by witches and transported to a place called Blakulla, the witches' Sabbath, led to widespread arrests. The trials were characterized by the strong pressure exerted on the accused to confess. Children testified against the accused since they said they had seen these individuals dancing with the devil and practicing maleficent arts. What was most cogent in the Torsåker witch trials was the fact that so many people were involved. So many children, being perceived as innocent and truthful, testified to the officials that there was indeed a massive conspiracy of witches. The belief in Blakulla, the place where the witches are said to meet with Satan, became so widespread that it became impossible almost to refute. The trials ended with a mass execution on June 1st, 1675, wherein the accused were beheaded and then burnt. The expediency with which the executions were performed, and with such efficacy, testifies to the belief of the authorities of dealing with a grave threat to society, in spite of the absence of practically any hard evidence. The Loudun Possessions. The possessions in Loudun in France have been singularly different from other witch trials based on demonic possessions and a certain scandalous turpitude associated with the Catholic Church. In the case of Loudun, several nuns of the Order of Ursulines claimed possession by demons, which then accused a priest, Father Urbain Grandier, of witchcraft. The Loudun possessions began in 1632 with strange behaviors in the Ursuline nuns of the convent in Loudun, including convulsions, speaking in tongues, and being tormented by evil spirits. They accused Father Grandier of possession through witchcraft and pacts with the devil. Already unpopular due to his political connections and other controversies within the church, Father Grandier found in this possession scandal the opportunity to finally be eliminated by his enemies. Despite protesting his innocence, Grandier was tortured and condemned to death. The most interesting thing about the case of Loudun is the degree to which it was embroiled with political and religious intrigue. The trials of the witches represent some of the darker moments of history, based on elements of fear, superstition, and tragedy. To those living at the time, they were seen as purges necessary to cleanse society of evil. But in a historical perspective, there arises an alarmingly dangerous mixture of religious fundamentalism, social paranoia, and personal vendettas. We look here at 5 of the most intriguing and haunting witch trials, and take a closer look at what was considered compelling evidence, and the societal forces driving such tragic events that could have made them seem right in the eyes of people then. Conclusion. The witch trials in history, 5 of which have been discussed here, namely the Salem Witch Trials, the Pendle Witch Trials, the Würzburg and Bamberg Trials, the Torsåker Witch Trials, and the Loudun Possessions, were an elusive combination of fear, superstition, religion, and social change. Each of these events was inspired by a powerful concoction of cultural belief, political intent, and personal grudges to stir up mass frenzy and injustice against hundreds of blameless people. These were not isolated incidents, but the reflection of deeper anxieties that plagued the respective societies. The most striking feature of these trials is how otherwise rational people became convinced of neighbors, friends, or even family members' guilt. The evidence, spectral visions, confessions obtained through torture, and testimony of children all point to a powerful compulsive element in accounting for tragedies that could not be explained, whether an illness, famine, or any type of political calamity. The scapegoat theory of witchcraft came in very handy, with the judicial systems at the time adding fuel to the hysteria. In retrospect, these trials remind us of the perils that come about when justice allows itself to be run by fear, suspicion, and irrationality. They remain as tragic testimonies to the fragility of human societies before the unknown, and how fast the dividing line between reality and superstition can fade under the load of collective fear. These stories continue to be told today for caution, as a reminder of the outcomes of unbridled paranoia and the need for due process and rational thinking when hysteria ensues. Thank you for spending time with us through Spookscope today. Feel free to share your knowledge and wisdom in the comments section. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and share it with your friends and family. Until next time, my dear spooker, stay curious.